Roland's Tom Hitchcock here. How are you?
Very good, Tom. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. Happy New Year. Did you manage to have some good downtime?
I did. Happy New Year yourself.
Thank you.
Good bit of time relaxing with the family and bit of home maintenance and so forth.
That's it. That's it. It's the time to catch up on the adulting chores, isn't it? So I don't know if we can call that downtime. We're put to purpose pretty quickly, eh?
Sure. Yep. Oh, yeah.
So,
Things.
we've spoken a few times. I've known you for a little while. We don't speak often enough. So I know a bit about you. I know our listeners do not. Okay. So how would you introduce yourself to a stranger, Roland?
Stranger. Well, I am an ERP specialist, enterprise resource planning software. I've spent most of my career in that, which is business software. It's the software that runs the core of most businesses, and people would think of SAP and similar big systems like that. And that's where I've spent most of my career. Some time in other systems, other software systems, and general IT. That's where I turned out to have become a specialist, and that's where the demand is, if you like. So I've leaned into that very hard in both the technical and on the business side.
Okay. And where did you start off? Where was you at the beginning of your career?
Beginning of my career was straight out of uni into a company called Financial Network Services, who no longer exist. They did banking software. They do exist in a form. They were bought out years later by Hardpart. That was a good experience. I joined a graduate group of 16 undergraduates, and they trained us straight away in COBOL, which is a very old computer language, which was in demand at the time because of lead up to Y2K, which they'd spent enough time on not to worry about, but lots of other companies hadn't. So there was a real inability to get people with those skills. So I trained in that language straight into TAFE out of uni, which was interesting. Did a traineeship, and great experience with that team, and with those people, we still regularly in contact with that group. It's a great time. Then 3 years there, specialist in banking software in a number of ways. I was on call for Y2K actually. That was good. To be the person tapped to do that, and then got 11 calls that night, and none of them were to do with Y2K, which is great.
So it's interesting that I reckon there'll be some young people listening to this that have no idea what Y2K is.
Oh, sure.
And my experience and if my memory serves me correctly, it kind of didn't happen as well. So maybe educate the younger listeners.
Definitely, but a lot of people worked very hard to make sure it didn't happen. It was
Isn't it?
well in advance. It wasn't a natural disaster. It was a man-made issue, a design flaw. And so the basic principle is that a lot of systems only kept 2 digits for the date, which 99 turns into 00. Suddenly, when you do date calculations, it becomes a negative instead of a positive. And you can imagine, if you know anything about software, that becomes a big issue very quickly. So the answer was that everything had to be changed to allow 4 digits for the year, which gives us a year 10,000 bug, but let's not talk about that yet. So we, a lot of systems already handled it, even in the time when everyone's talking about it, like those 3 years, 5 years beforehand. There was a number of systems, though, that didn't handle it because they were quite old at the time. And we're talking 20 years old even then. And those systems didn't have a lot of people that knew how to maintain them. So if there's a theme in my career, it's been maintainability is very important, because you might be the one maintaining it. So whatever you're doing, make sure that you can understand how to fix it later at short notice needed. So don't make things complicated. Make things easy to understand for someone in a hurry who has to find what the issue is, understand the issue, fix it, roll it out, etc.
I recognise that. I took I did a favour for someone recently. Well, I took their mechanical bed to pieces, okay, to then move it and put it back together again, all without the instructions. So you know, I got to talking about there. It's
Oh my
like
God,
my
isn't it?
bolts are slightly different, and all this is, and it had to, and then when it spread out again, I'm going to remember it. I know it. Took my photos, make it as easy as possible to maintain. I think I put it back. Can I get it right? Didn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, bits left over, this bit's backwards.
That's it. Were there any uh, famous casualties from Y2K? Was there any that?
Uh, did anything really fail? Not that I remember. Um, yeah, just thinking out to the wider industry, and I think that's what gave the public this general impression that it was a bit of a pisser, because you know we'd spent all of this time, like the whole industry had spent all this time and effort making sure it wasn't. There was a lot of big projects, and yeah, they didn't deliver anything obvious in improvements, but they made sure it didn't fail. So that was, yeah, I remember finding little bugs years and years later that were actual Y2K bugs, but they're the kinds of things that didn't matter. It was just like presentation on a screen and things like that that just got overlooked because, you know, you can look in lots of places, but you can't look everywhere. Software, you know, we're talking millions of lines of code. It's like a book, or in fact, it's, you know, a stack of encyclopedias, I guess, is one big system effectively, and looking through that for all the specific cases of something, particular kinds of problems. And you can find all of this case and all of that case and all the other case, but there's still a few cases that haven't been thought of because, well, honestly, it's hard to cover everything. You can't think of every possibility, if you know what I mean.
Of course, it sounds a little bit like an example of survival bias, doesn't it?
Oh,
Well, it's you know, well, nothing seriously bad happened, so it can't have been a problem. Whereas, obviously, in your case, a lot of work, time, and effort and money went into preventing that problem. So, kudos to yourself and everybody else that's
well,
worked on that.
I can't claim much credit for that. I didn't do any specific work on it before the time that company I worked for had it covered, if you like, which is great. I guess what I'd say there though was the testing was the key thing. So one, making sure that, you know, theoretically you've got everything covered. The second part is actually testing it and making sure it's going to work. So having a safe test bed, a sandbox, whatever you want to call it, set up where you can run through all of those motions and see what happens, and make sure that, oh yeah, that all works okay. You didn't have anything, you know, blow up, catch fire. So we're all safe to go, and that's where a lot of the work is. And some of these live systems, you know, they talk about business critical versus system critical, and then ultimately, if you get into sort of medicine and so forth, which I never have, then it's life critical. So yeah, test appropriately for the situation and make sure there's fallbacks.
Okay, so let's talk about ERPs because it's one of those things now which is firmly in with people's transferable skills at the user end. Okay, so back in the day, it used to be, can someone use MS Suite, for example? You know, the basics, which goes job to job. An ERP, ATS, CRM, or whatever people want to call it, is pretty much standard in most roles now. You're going to be hard pushed to, that they do exist, but find companies that don't use a system, which everybody has to use at some point. You know, what would you say the general trends, the way things are going in ERP systems?
Cloud-based definitely is a massive trend. So most of these big systems now have a cloud offering, and you may still be able to buy a server-based offering with a one-off fee. A lot of companies now are taking the option of being server-free, serverless, which just takes a whole bunch of worry off their heads. It's someone else's problem, and away you go. So you pay your monthly, yearly subscription, and you get access to the data. There's a whole question of whether that's great in the long term, not owning things. It's definitely not better value for money on some metrics, but on other ones, when you factor in that you're not doing all of that security work, the server, IT, and so forth. For some companies, it's perfect, especially startups. That's a whole heap in their salaries they don't have to pay. Especially, if you're just getting the system for one thing, and that's a whole bunch of unused capacity for them that they don't need. It's hard to get part-time people for that sort of stuff.
What
The other
about,
big,
sorry.
the other big trend would be obviously AI, which has had some wins, but a lot of misses as well. So a lot of people are skeptical about where that's going. The big win for ERP systems and AI is probably document scanning and similar things like that, where you've got the old optical character recognition, OCR type systems would recognize the characters but wouldn't know what to do with it. Good document scanning AI systems will read it all, put it in context, and know what to do with it. So you've got things that will recognize that this is an invoice from this vendor and they like to use this format, this layout, and then bang, it goes through and comes through into your system in the right layout, and bang, away it goes. So that's automating a whole function, your AP accounting stuff.
Okay.
Not, taken away, but they can be moved on to higher value efforts, higher value jobs.
On the cloud part, obviously you've got public and private cloud. I hear little whispers of discontent where our public information is sitting. So, for example, AWS has a lot of information on Australians, and then you've got the sovereignty of where the data sits. Is it sitting in the States? Is it sitting here? What have you? And the potential complications with that. Obviously, data's one of the biggest currencies out there at the moment. Where it sits and who controls it, essentially. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a massive topic, and we could probably have a whole discussion just on this. It's data's the new gold, so everyone wants it. The level you're talking about, where it matters if it's in Australia or not, we're talking about governments and highly sensitive data, like people's medical data, for instance. For a lot of reasons, you don't want it to go to some other country where, bad actors, which include some governments, could, get access to it fairly easily. So that's a concern, and fortunately, Australia's very lucky. We have a lot of data centers in Australia, and it's pretty easy to know that your S3 bucket's sitting in Australia and Sydney, Melbourne, etc. There's a whole other level there about your platform providers, where you're talking to ERP systems are one of these, but there's a number of other smaller systems that don't make the ERP grade, but still cloud providers, and they'll be resting their data somewhere, but you don't necessarily know where that is unless you go and find detail through the terms and conditions, and that might not even say it. So you've got to be fairly careful with a lot of these systems that you're using, where they're putting their data, and that's a whole thing as well. Your password managers are a great example of that. So LastPass got hacked a few years ago, I think, if I'm remembering rightly, and things like that. And turns out that they weren't doing a great job with where they were keeping their data. So it pays to know. With these cloud providers, their risk is your risk. So you have to be right up in their business and understand what they're doing. And if they're not doing good enough, you have to push them to do harder. And you might only have a choice between 2 or 3 vendors for some things. So you've got to look at them all fairly carefully and say, well, hang on, what are you guys doing here? We need one of you to step up. Who's it going to be? As a smaller company, you don't have a lot of influence with some of those either. Big companies can play hardball and get special treatment, custom treatment, but that costs a fortune. So to get your generic SaaS provider to do something useful is often quite hard, and there's a whole influence game there, and it depends on the size of the business and all sorts of factors and what's available. And often what you think is a reasonable price point, when you start looking at these questions a bit hard, starts getting much more expensive if they're not willing to step up and do the right thing. A lot of them will, with a bit of prompting. Oh, we're working on that, our developers are doing that, it's going to be 6 months, etc. But then 6 months later, still not quite done yet. The software game
sounds like a bit of a power struggle to me, and probably it has a little feel, but I'm a bit cynical in my old age now. It's a bit of a ticking time bomb as well in some respects. I think it's one major wrong turn and it's sort of opened a can of worms potentially.
Yeah, there's a lot of those kind of risks in cybersecurity in general. You don't know where the next problem is going to come from. You've just got to sort of cover your bases and make sure that you've done all the reasonable things you can do. And some of the ideal things, well, they're not reasonable. So you've got to find your comfortable risk position, like play it out, war game, and say, well, what's the worst thing that'll happen if this scenario comes true? How would that go? Where does our data end up? Some hacker gets into your system. What do they have access to? So be comfortable and don't put things where they shouldn't be if you're not comfortable with the risks.
Okay, so let's take this back to the individual. So wherever they may be in the world, your mums and dads, whomever's listening to this, what would be your advice, knowing what you know, for people to look after their own digital assets?
Oh, turn on MFA, multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication. Turn it on right now. Don't use SMS for that. Use any authenticator app. Microsoft, Google, there's a number of authenticator apps in the Google and the App Store. Turn it on for everything you can. Facebook, email. Don't have the same password for your email and other things. Make your password something that you can remember, that aren't necessarily dictionary words. Join a few words together, put numbers and characters in between them if you like. But the big one is probably just multi-factor authentication. That's the obvious one. Let me come back to you on that one. there might be a few more steps. There's that one though that's the big one I'd tell everyone.
What's the reason why not to use the SMS?
Because it can be faked. So you see a lot of scams. I see a lot of scams on my phone. Text messages coming from real numbers in Australian numbers, sometimes overseas numbers. And there's no point replying to those half the time because, and I've actually done this. I've replied to these texts years ago and said, various things like you might have been hacked, or what's going on here, or stuff like that. And sometimes these people have no idea what I'm talking about because some hacker has used their number, faked their number. So I don't recommend replying to those because you're either going to random person who's completely confused, or you're actually going to get a hacker, and you probably don't want to go down that road if you're not technical at all on a cybersecurity level either. Not just some, I know a bit about technology, programming or something. That can be a nasty path. I'll leave that to the specialists.
Okay, well, and what I want to know as well, so there might be a bit of interest here on the basis of the career pathways. Okay, at what point did you decide, you have your aha moment that you want to be in IT, you want to be in cyber, you want to be in ERP? When did it become a passion play?
I have made a point of keeping my career options flexible right from the start. So I picked a uni degree, science, general science, even though I could have done much more. That gave me lots of options because I hadn't really made up my mind. And I did maths and geology, of all things, together. And that sort of went in some interesting directions. Thought I might want to be a geologist. Spend all my time out in the country looking at rocks, and that didn't happen for various reasons. The mining industry was in a downturn. Sent out lots of applications, got lots of rejection letters, 50 at the time, and then did get as far as the interview with one of them, but then also applied for other stuff. And one of them was this, software company in Sydney. I had to move from Newcastle to Sydney to take this job, and that was complete retraining. I hadn't done much programming at all. I'd done a little bit with maths, but it wasn't the focus of anything. And when I went, didn't look back. I really enjoyed it, and went with that. Yeah, went from there, from banking software, a few years later, into mining software, and moved back to Newcastle with a young family for those reasons too, to be closer to family and help and everything. And then, specialised in that. So 20 years of that same company, but it wasn't the same job the whole way through. It was a lot of different things in the one job. I kind of company changed multiple times, reorganisations and so forth. So every few years, it was something pretty drastically different. I was working on different systems. I was doing different jobs, very different roles. So that was quite good for a long time. And then that kind of made me the specialist I am. Took that out years later after deciding to further the career a little bit. And again, wound up in multiple different industries over the last few years, last 5 years or so. I worked in manufacturing, aged care, retail, jewelry, and then steel. So manufacturing again. So being available to, or being open to those big options, big highest value. I'm not saying purely chase the money there. I'm saying big new opportunities. Do something interesting. One job straight into doing a website, and then designing a hologram machine interface, and random connections, but all software, or implementing software. I guess what I'm taking it back, what I'm trying to say there is being flexible and open to new opportunities, and not just saying, "Oh, I'm a software programmer. I should be doing this in these languages." Because I've seen so many ads over the years that want 5 years experience of this particular thing, and they're not looking for someone to do anything new or interesting. They're just looking for someone to bring over their experience from another company, do the same job, and move on. So those kind of jobs are almost a red flag, because most people who've worked in software for a long time know that you can learn a new language fairly easily if you want to.
That makes perfect sense. It's interesting because we speak to quite a few people on here, and a lot of people have their eureka moment where they determine, right, this is my passion, this is my play, and I've got no experience. I'm going to go full steam ahead in it. But that's not common. That's not common at all. Most people never find that. And what's more common is the route that you're talking about, where things become a bit more circumstantial. They go through the process of learning something which may be applied in different areas. So they've got options, they go for a period of rejection, which is never nice. It knocks your confidence and gets you questioning your decision making. But eventually opportunity presents itself, and you need to be able to take those opportunities. And the fact that an opportunity presents itself, you took it, and you found out that you really enjoyed what you were doing. It's like your career found you in the end.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. When I was, those times I was looking for jobs, of all the things that I'd done and said, that was the one thing it turned out that I could point to that people found, other companies found a lot of value in. I was like, well, that's it. I'm being pigeonholed a little bit here. It's happening. But it's also it was also important to people to come in and to build these systems. And, well, in some cases, I'm working with an existing system, but I'm building the company's internal system around what's possible with the systems that they've got, if you know what I mean. And in other cases, I'm into a new retailer who's got multiple companies at the state level and had some systems, but there was a whole lot of chaos as well. And my job sort of became to build something cohesive and systematic out of what was there, improve what was working, which was really good, by the way. I'm not knocking what they had at all. That was a great company in a lot of ways. Still is a great company, and they've built on that. Took it to the state level, or national level. Went all around the place. Did the R&D. Proved it, tested it, rolled it out. It's good fun. So that was a great experience in a lot of ways, being from that low level. Here's this bootstrap company, a whole bunch of stuff going on, and doing everything as fast as we can, and working as hard as we can to make something from nothing effectively, but building these systems from first principles. We had, we need something that does this. People are wasting a lot of time doing that. How can we do it? And not resting on, old tried and true things at all. Let's look at what's possible right now with the tools we have available in the market now. And that company basically became cloud native. Why would we have a server these days? And ran with all of these tools that you could get, all commercially available. Built them together in various ways, hooked them up in the ways that systems could be hooked up at the time. And there's a lot of stuff we couldn't do that we wanted to do, but we still managed to work it all together in quite good ways. And as that company grows, it's going to sort of become more mature and less chaotic. You built the systems, and there's a real chaotic period as you're doing that of finding out what works and what doesn't, and then it tails. Gets more mature, and you start refining, and everyone's comfortable with that, and you've got more people relying on it. And the more and more people you have using a system, the harder it is to change it. You've got to be very careful once you've got lots of people live on the system. Then you get to these really big companies where they really can't change much at all. They've got to be very careful and go through huge amounts of testing, all sorts of policies and procedures and so forth. Whereas your small companies are much more agile. They can break all the rules they want because they've only got half a dozen people that might care about a particular thing. So there you go. But then it becomes successful, and those things that you started with become a
little bit more rigid.
Yeah, it becomes ossified, petrified. These processes keep on going, and people just repeat them because that's what they've been doing, which is the worst phrase you'll ever hear. That's how we always do it.
All right, there's some really good insights there. I appreciate that, and it's nice to hear your story. This is drawn to a close now. This is where we wrap up. But if someone likes what you're saying and wants to maybe ask you some questions, how should they make contact with you?
Sure. People can hit me on LinkedIn, Roland Neilands, ROLAND,
Fantastic. Too easy. Thanks a lot for your time. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Cheers.
Thank you for watching this episode. I hope that you did enjoy it, had lots of takeaways from it. As before, please subscribe below so you can keep on top of any new releases we have. And also, if you would like to have your story told, just reach out with me and I'd love to give you that platform. My best email address is tom@purplepatchconsulting.com. Thank you.